All right, so get ready because today we're going deep, like microscopic deep,
Oh, wow.
into the fascinating world of human cells. We'll be exploring Dr. Rasha Eldeeb's physiology handout and basically trying to break down all these crazy processes that are going on inside, well, inside all of us right now.
And what's really cool is we're not talking about just abstract biology here. We're talking about literally the building blocks that make up our bodies, the very foundation of, well, of life.
I love that. And the handout actually starts with this really cool concept that form dictates function.
Exactly. So the structure of something determines its capabilities. You can think about it like a car. Its engine, wheels, chassis. They're all specifically designed to work together to get you from point A to point B. And cells are the same way. Each part has a specific job to do, and its design is, well, perfectly suited for that role.
That makes total sense. So let's zoom in on the cell itself. What's the first thing we encounter on this microscopic journey?
The gatekeeper, the cell membrane, you can think of it as a selectively permeable barrier. It's the bouncer at the cell's exclusive club, deciding what molecules can enter and exit.
So not just anyone can just waltz into a cell. There's a strict door policy.
Absolutely. And the selectivity is crucial for maintaining the cell's internal environment, keeping things stable and balanced. And the core of the membrane is a lipid bilayer, two layers of phospholipids arranged tail to tail.
Now, I remember from, high school biology that phospholipids have these interesting properties. Can you refresh my memory on how they form this barrier?
Of course. So each phospholipid molecule has a hydrophilic head, meaning it loves water, and a hydrophobic tail, meaning it avoids water. So imagine these molecules like tiny magnets. The water-loving heads are naturally drawn to the watery environments, both inside and outside the cell.
Okay, so the heads face the water. But what about those water-avoiding tails? Where do they go?
They huddle together in the middle, tucked away from the water. So this creates a stable barrier because to cross, a molecule has to pass through both layers of heads. And E, that oily inner layer.
That's really clever. But wouldn't a completely solid wall be even better at keeping unwanted things out?
You might think so, but the cell needs to be able to interact with its environment, right? It needs to take in nutrients and expel waste. That's where the fluid mosaic model comes in.
Okay, I've heard that term before, but what does it actually mean?
It describes how the membrane isn't a rigid wall, but rather a dynamic, ever-changing structure. The phospholipids and proteins within the membrane are constantly moving around, like a bustling crowd.
So it's not just a static barrier, it's more like a fluid mosaic. Okay, I'm starting to see why it's called that.
Exactly. And this fluidity is vital for cell function. It allows the membrane to adapt, change shape, and respond to signals from the environment. Think about how a white blood cell engulfs a bacterium. It needs a flexible membrane to achieve that.
Wow, so the fluidity of the membrane is actually essential for like fighting infection. That's amazing.
It is. Now, let's not forget the other key players in this membrane mosaic. Proteins. They're scattered throughout the membrane, carrying out a variety of jobs.
So it's almost like a city built into the wall itself, with all these different workers performing different tasks.
That's a great analogy. Some proteins act as pumps, moving substances across the membrane. Others act as receptors, binding to specific molecules and triggering cellular responses.
So if the lipid bilayer is the wall, the proteins are like the doors and windows, allowing for a, controlled entry and exit.
Exactly. And don't forget about the carbohydrates on the cell surface. They form a sugary coating called the glycopolix, which acts like an ID card, helping the body recognize its own cells.
Ah, so it's like a cellular fingerprint that helps our immune system distinguish friend from foe.
Precisely. Now, we've spent quite a bit of time at the gate, but let's venture inside and explore the bustling city within, the cytoplasm.
Lead the way. I'm eager to see what's happening in this cellular metropolis.
First, we encounter the endoplasmic reticulum, or ER. Think of it as the city's manufacturing and transportation hub.
Okay, what's being manufactured and transported in this cellular factory?
Well, there are two types of ER, rough ER and smooth ER. Rough ER is studded with ribosomes, which are like tiny protein factories, churning out proteins based on the cell's genetic blueprints. Smooth ER, on the other hand, is involved in lipid synthesis, detoxification, and other essential processes.
So the ER is like a network of factories and highways producing and transporting these vital molecules throughout the cell. What happens to these molecules once they're made?
They often get shipped to the Golgi complex, another essential organelle. Imagine it as the the cellular post office,
Hmm.
where molecules are sorted, packaged, and shipped to their final destinations.
So if the ER is the manufacturing and transport system,
Mm,
the Golgi complex is the logistics and distribution center.
exactly. It ensures that the right molecules get to the right places at the right times.
That level of organization is incredible. Now, what about waste disposal in the cellular city? I imagine things can get pretty messy with all this activity.
You're right, waste management is crucial. And for that, we have lysosomes, um, membrane-bound spheres filled with powerful enzymes.
Enzymes, what do they do?
Enzymes are like tiny molecular scissors that can break down molecules. Lysosomes use these enzymes to break down waste products, recycle cellular components, and even destroy invading bacteria.
So lysosomes are like the cell's recycling center and sanitation department all rolled into one.
Exactly. They play a vital role in keeping the cell clean, efficient, and healthy. However, sometimes these lysosomes can malfunction. Think of, like autoimmune diseases. They can be caused by lysosomes mistakenly attacking the body's own cells.
Wow, so a tiny malfunction at the cellular level can have huge implications for the entire body? That's a bit unsettling.
It is, and it highlights how important it is for all these cellular processes to work in harmony.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of harmony, we can't forget the powerhouse of the cell, right? The organelle that keeps everything running, the mitochondria. What makes them so special?
What's fascinating about mitochondria is their unique double membrane structure. The inner membrane is folded into cristae, which increases the surface area for ATP production. They're the sites of cellular respiration, where nutrients are converted into usable energy.
Okay, so mitochondria are essentially tiny power plants fueling all the activities of the cell.
Precisely. They're essential for everything, from muscle contraction to nerve impulse transmission. And interestingly, there's a link between mitochondrial function and aging.
Really? How so?
As we age, our mitochondria become less efficient at producing energy. And this decline in mitochondrial function is thought to contribute to various age-related diseases.
That's really interesting. So these tiny organelles might hold clues to understanding the aging process itself.
Exactly. Now, let's not forget about ribosomes. The protein factories we mentioned earlier. Remember, they're scattered throughout the cytoplasm, diligently translating genetic instructions into proteins.
Right, so they take the blueprints from DNA and use them to assemble amino acids into proteins.
Exactly. And this protein synthesis is absolutely central to cell function. Proteins are involved in virtually every aspect of cell life, from structure and support to communication and defense.
Wow, ribosomes have a huge responsibility. They're like the construction crews of the cell, building everything according to the DNA blueprints.
That's a great way to put it. Now, we've talked about a lot of activity in the cytoplasm, but there's one crucial organelle we haven't explored yet. The nucleus, the command center of the cell.
Yes. The nucleus is where the cell's DNA is stored, right? It's like the library holding all the genetic information.
Exactly. And within the nucleus, we also find the nucleolus, a dense region responsible for producing ribosomes. Remember, those ribosomes are essential for translating the genetic code into proteins.
Okay, so the nucleus not only stores the genetic information, it also helps produce the machinery that puts that information into action. That's incredible.
It is. And that brings us to the fascinating process of how DNA actually directs protein synthesis. It's a two-step process called transcription and translation.
All right, let's break those down. What happens during transcription?
Transcription is like copying a recipe from a cookbook. DNA's information is transcribed into a molecule called messenger RNA, or mRNA. Think of mRNA as a temporary copy of a gene that can leave the nucleus.
So mRNA carries the instructions out of the nucleus, but then what? How does it actually get turned into a protein?
That's where translation comes in. The mRNA travels to a ribosome, where its code is used to assemble amino acids into a protein. It involves another type of RNA called transfer RNA, or tRNA,
Right.
which acts like a delivery truck, bringing specific amino acids to the ribosome based on the mRNA's instructions.
So it's like a construction crew following blueprints to build a structure. The mRNA is the blueprint, the ribosome is the construction site, and the tRNA brings the building materials, the amino acids.
Precisely. Each codon, a three-letter sequence on the mRNA, specifies a particular amino acid. tRNA molecules have matching anticodons that bind to the codons, ensuring that the correct amino acids are added in the right order.
It's amazing how precise this process is. What happens to the chain of amino acids once it's assembled? Does it just float around in the cytoplasm?
Not quite. The chain then folds into a specific 3D shape, and that shape is critical for the protein's function. Think of it like origami, where a flat sheet of paper is folded into a complex structure.
So the sequence of amino acids determines the protein's shape, and the shape determines its function. It's all connected.
Exactly. And that, in a nutshell, is how DNA directs protein synthesis, which is at the heart of cell function.
Wow. We've covered so much ground already, from the cell membrane to the nucleus, and this intricate process of protein synthesis. It's remarkable how much is happening inside each of our cells.
It really is. And believe it or not, we've only just begun to explore the amazing world of the cell.
Okay, so welcome back to our deep dive into the world of human cells. I'm ready to go a little bit deeper and explore some of the remarkable processes that are happening inside these tiny universes.
I'm glad to hear it. Let's shift our focus a little bit to how substances actually move across that selectively permeable membrane we talked about earlier.
Right, the cell's very own border control. I'm curious, how does it decide which molecules get the VIP treatment and which ones are, left waiting in line?
Well, it's not about VIP status. It's more about the cell's needs and the properties of the molecules themselves.
Yeah.
One of the key ways substances move across the membrane is through diffusion.
Diffusion. Okay, that rings a bell. It's about molecules moving from high concentration to low concentration, right? Like, I don't know, like when you open a bottle of essential oil and the scent gradually fills the room.
Exactly. Molecules are constantly in motion, bouncing around and spreading out. So if there's a higher concentration of a substance outside the cell than inside, those molecules will naturally diffuse across the membrane until things reach equilibrium.
That makes sense. But what about molecules that can't just slip through the membrane's lipid bilayer? How do they get across?
That's where facilitated diffusion comes in. It's still diffusion, meaning molecules move down the concentration gradient, but they need a little help from transport proteins embedded in the membrane.
Okay, so these transport proteins act like specialized doorways, allowing certain molecules to pass through.
Exactly. Think of them as gatekeepers with very specific instructions. Some proteins are like revolving doors, allowing molecules to pass through freely. Others are more like selective channels, only opening for certain molecules with the right shape or charge.
That's pretty ingenious. It allows the cell to control the flow of substances that can't diffuse freely, like glucose, the cell's primary source of energy, or ions, which are crucial for maintaining electrical balance.
Precisely. And this type of selective transport is vital for, well, a multitude of cellular processes, from nerve impulse transmission to muscle contraction.
Wow, so even at the microscopic level, it's all about control and balance. But what happens when a cell needs to move something against the concentration gradient? That must take some effort, right?
You're absolutely right, it does. That's where active transport comes into play. This process requires energy, usually in the form of ATP, the cell's energy currency, to move molecules from an area of low concentration to an area of high concentration.
So it's like swimming upstream. The cell has to expend energy to move against the flow.
Exactly. A prime example of active transport is the sodium-potassium pump.
Now, I've heard that name before. It's something to do with nerve cells, right?
It is. The sodium-potassium pump is a protein that uses ATP to pump sodium ions out of the cell and potassium ions into the cell. This creates concentration gradients that are essential for nerve impulse transmission and muscle function.
Okay, so active transport is like a cellular pump, constantly working to maintain the right balance of ions inside and outside the cell.
Precisely. It's like a never-ending tug of war, ensuring that the cell has the right ingredients in the right concentrations to carry out its vital functions.
It's amazing how much work is going on at the membrane to keep everything running smoothly. Now, what about those processes I've heard about, endocytosis and exocytosis? How do those fit into the picture?
Those are fascinating processes. They involve transporting large molecules or even entire particles, things that are too big to simply diffuse or squeeze through transport proteins.
So it's like the cell has its own special delivery and shipping services for bulky packages.
That's a great way to visualize it. Endocytosis is like the cell engulfing a package. The cell membrane folds inward, surrounding the substance and forming a vesicle that pinches off and enters the cytoplasm.
So it's like the cell is like wrapping itself around the substance and pulling it in.
Exactly. And there are different types of endocytosis, depending on what's being taken in. Phagocytosis, for example, is how certain immune cells engulf and destroy bacteria.
That's how our bodies fight off infections at the cellular level. Incredible. So what about exocytosis? Is that like sending packages out?
Exactly. Exocytosis is the process of releasing substances from the cell. a vesicle containing the substance fuses with the cell membrane, releasing its contents to the outside.
So it's like a cellular delivery truck,
Yeah,
merging with the membrane and dropping off its cargo.
precisely. Exocytosis is used for, well, everything, from releasing hormones and neurotransmitters to expelling waste products.
Okay, so we got diffusion, facilitated diffusion, active transport, endocytosis, and exocytosis. That's a lot of ways for substances to move in and out of the cell.
It is, and it highlights the dynamic nature of the cell membrane and the intricate mechanisms that cells use to interact with their environment.
It really makes you appreciate the complexity of life, even at the microscopic level. Now, I'm curious about how different cells in our bodies know what to do. I mean, we have, what, over 200 different types of cells, all working together in this incredibly coordinated way. How does that happen?
That's a great question. It all comes down to cell specialization. Every cell in your body contains the same DNA, the same genetic blueprint. But during development, different cells activate different genes, which leads to the production of different proteins.
So it's like having a giant toolbox, but each cell only uses the tools it needs for its specific job.
Exactly. For example, muscle cells activate genes that code for contractile proteins, allowing them to generate force and movement. Nerve cells activate genes that code for ion channels and neurotransmitters, enabling them to transmit electrical signals.
That's fascinating. So even though all cells have the same DNA, they can become incredibly diverse based on which genes they express.
Precisely. And this specialization is what allows multicellular organisms like us to function as a coordinated whole, with different tissues and organs working together to maintain life.
It's like a symphony orchestra, with each instrument playing its unique part to create a harmonious whole. Speaking of harmony, how do cells actually communicate with each other? I mean, they can't exactly pick up the phone and chat, can they?
You're right, they can't. But they do have sophisticated ways of communicating. And it's essential for coordinating all those diverse cellular activities we've been talking about.
Okay, so spill the secrets. How do cells talk to each other?
Well, they use a variety of methods,
Yeah.
including direct contact, chemical signaling, and electrical signaling.
Let's break those down. What does direct contact involve?
Direct contact is essentially cells physically touching each other and sharing information. They often use specialized junctions that allow for the passage of signals or molecules. For example, gap junctions are like tiny tunnels connecting the cytoplasm of adjacent cells, allowing for rapid communication and coordination.
So it's like a direct line of communication, allowing cells to share information quickly and efficiently.
Exactly. This type of communication is particularly important in tissues like the heart, where cells need to contract in unison to pump blood effectively.
Okay, that makes sense. What about chemical signaling? How does that work?
Chemical signaling is more like sending messages in bottles. Cells release signaling molecules, such as hormones or neurotransmitters, that travel to other cells and bind to specific receptors.
So it's like sending a coded message that only certain cells can decipher.
Exactly. The binding of the signaling molecule to the receptor triggers a cascade of events inside the target cell, leading to a specific response.
That's pretty amazing. It's like a chain reaction, with one signal leading to a whole series of events within the cell. So what kinds of things are cells communicating about through chemical signals?
Oh, all sorts of things. Everything from growth and development to metabolism and immune responses. For example, when you get a cut, chemical signals are released that attract immune cells to the site of injury to fight off infection.
Wow, so chemical signaling is essential for our bodies to function properly and protect themselves. What about electrical signaling? I thought that was mainly for nerve cells.
You're right. Electrical signaling is the primary mode of communication for nerve cells. But other cell types can use it too, albeit to a lesser extent. It involves changes in the cell's membrane potential, which can be propagated along the cell membrane and transmitted to other cells.
So it's like sending an electrical impulse down a wire.
Precisely. This type of signaling is incredibly fast and efficient, which is why it's so important for the nervous system, where signals need to travel quickly throughout the body.
Okay, so we've got direct contact, chemical signals, and electrical signals. It seems like cells have a whole arsenal of communication tools at their disposal.
They do. And this communication is vital for coordinating the activities of trillions of cells, ensuring that our bodies function as a harmonious whole.
It really makes you appreciate the incredible complexity and interconnectedness of life at the cellular level. It's like a vast, intricate network with every cell playing its part.
Exactly. And when this intricate communication network breaks down, things can go wrong, leading to various diseases and disorders.
That makes sense. So, understanding how cells communicate is not only fascinating, it's also crucial for understanding health and disease.
Absolutely. And we've just scratched the surface of this vast and dynamic field of cell biology.
hmm
There's so much more to explore.
So, welcome back to our deep dive. We've been on quite a journey exploring this intricate world of human cells. It's really mind-boggling to think about all these processes happening inside, well, inside each of us right now.
It really is. And one of the most remarkable processes is the cell cycle, the the series of events that leads to cell division and replication.
Oh, yes, cell division, right. That's how we grow from a single fertilized egg into a complex organism, right?
Right.
It's also how our bodies repair damaged tissue.
Exactly. The cell cycle is a highly regulated process that ensures each new daughter cell receives a complete and accurate copy of the genetic material.
Now, I vaguely remember learning about mitosis and meiosis back in, gosh, biology class. Can you give us a refresher on these two types of cell division?
Of course. Mitosis is how most cells in our body divide. It's a carefully choreographed dance in which the cell duplicates its DNA and then divides into two identical daughter cells. Each daughter cell ends up with the same number of chromosomes as the parent cell.
So mitosis is like cloning a cell, making an exact copy.
That's a good way to think about it. It's essential for growth, repair, and, well, the general upkeep of our tissues. Meiosis, on the other hand, is a special type of cell division that produces gametes, sperm and egg cells.
Ah, yes. Meiosis, that's for sexual reproduction.
Precisely. And what makes meiosis unique is that it involves two rounds of division, resulting in four daughter cells. But here's the key difference. Each daughter cell ends up with only half the number of chromosomes as the parent cell.
Half the number. Why is that important?
That's a great question. It's all about maintaining the correct number of chromosomes in the next generation. When a sperm fertilizes an egg, their chromosomes combine, because each gamete contributed half a set. The fertilized egg ends up with a full set of chromosomes, half from the mother and half from the father.
Ah, that makes sense. It's like each parent is contributing their own unique recipe book to the mix.
That's a wonderful analogy. Meiosis ensures that each generation inherits a combination of genetic information from both parents, creating diversity. It's why siblings from the same parents can look so different from each other.
It's like shuffling the deck of cards with each new generation, leading to endless possibilities. So mitosis is for growth and repair, creating identical cells, while meiosis is for sexual reproduction, generating diverse offspring. It's incredible how these two processes play such distinct but crucial roles in the perpetuation of life.
Absolutely. And when you zoom out and consider the sheer scale of cellular activity happening inside us, it's truly mind-blowing. There's trillions of cells are constantly dividing, communicating, transporting molecules,
Yeah.
manufacturing proteins, and breaking down waste. It's all orchestrated with incredible precision.
It really puts things into perspective, doesn't it? We often go about our day-to-day lives without giving much thought to these microscopic processes that are happening inside every cell of our body.
That's true. But the more we understand about the cell, the more we appreciate the elegance and complexity of life itself.
I couldn't agree more. Well, this deep dive into the cell has been an incredible journey. We've explored the intricate structures and functions that make life possible, from that selectively permeable cell membrane to the bustling cytoplasm, the command center nucleus, and these remarkable processes of cell communication and division.
It's been a pleasure sharing this exploration with you, and I hope this deep dive has ignited a sense of wonder and curiosity about this microscopic world within each of us.
Absolutely. It's truly remarkable what's happening inside every one of our cells. And if you're interested in learning more about this fascinating subject, well, there are countless resources available. You can delve deeper into specific cell types, explore the latest research on cell biology, or even, see cells up close and personal through a microscope.
And remember, this is just the beginning. There's always more to discover, more to learn, and more to marvel at within this intricate world of the cell.
That's a great reminder to all our listeners. Keep those minds curious and those microscopes handy. The world of the cell is waiting to be explored. Until next time.
Happy exploring.